In a quiet coastal town in Oregon, where seagulls cry and waves crash under an old wooden bridge, there's a weathered park bench. It's a simple bench, overlooking the water, a silent witness to the hundreds of lives that quietly cross paths there every day. Our story begins with Henry Cole. At 55, Henry was a boat repairman, a man whose hands were as calloused as his heart seemed to be. A widower, he was known for keeping to himself, a gruff, quiet figure against the backdrop of the sea. Every evening, like clockwork, at precisely 6 p.m., Henry would take his seat on that same bench by the bridge. He wouldn't speak. He wouldn't smile. He would just sit and watch the tide roll in, lost in a world of his own. The locals would whisper as they passed that it's the man who lost his wife in the storm of '09. It was a tragedy that had become part of the town's folklore, and Henry was its living ghost. He always carried an old, leather-bound journal. It was filled with scribbled notes, half-written letters, and sketches of boats that would never feel the spray of the ocean, dreams that had sunk long ago. One evening, a young woman named Lila, just 17, passed by. With a camera always hanging around her neck, she was an aspiring photographer, constantly searching for the perfect shot. As she walked by the bridge, the setting sun cast a golden glow, illuminating the solitary figure on the bench. It was a poignant scene. She raised her camera and, with a soft click, captured the moment. Henry's head snapped up, his brow furrowed into a deep frown. Lila's cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "I'm sorry, sir," she stammered, clutching her camera. The light had just looked so peaceful. Henry's voice was raspy, like gravel grinding against stone. He grunted, turning his gaze back to the endless water. "There's nothing peaceful about loss, kid." His words hung in the salty air, a wall between his grief and the world. Lila didn't say another word. She just walked away, the weight of his sadness echoing in her mind. About a week later, the rhythm of Henry's solitary vigil was broken. A little boy named Sam, no older than 8, came tearing past the bench, his face alight with joy as he chased a bright red kite. He was a whirlwind of energy, his laughter mixing with the sound of the gulls. Suddenly, a gust of wind caught the kite, and with a sharp snap, the string broke. The kite soared out over the water, dipping and diving before beginning its slow descent toward the waves. Sam's laughter died in his throat, his eyes wide with impending tears. But before the first sob could escape, something unexpected happened. Henry Cole stood up. Without a word, he walked down the sandy bank, wading into the cold, shallow tide until the water was up to his knees. He reached out and snatched a kite string just before it was swallowed by the sea. He returned, dripping wet, his old boots squelching with every step, and handed the kite back to the stunned little boy. "Next time," Henry said, his voice surprisingly gentle, "tie a stronger knot." Sam's face broke into a wide, toothy grin. "You sound just like my grandpa," he chirped. And for the first time in more years than anyone could remember, a sound escaped Henry's lips that was almost a chuckle, a flicker of warmth in the cold expanse of his solitude. That same evening, as the sun began to paint the sky in hues of orange and purple, Lila was back at the bridge. From a distance, she had seen the entire exchange. As Henry handed the kite back to Sam, the setting sun created a perfect silhouette behind them, a moment of pure, unscripted kindness. She quietly raised her camera and took another photo. This one felt different. It wasn't just a picture of a lonely man. It was a story. Later that night, Lila submitted the photo to her school's online photography contest. She gave it a simple caption: "Kindness doesn't shout, it just shows up." The effect was immediate and astonishing. In a small town connected by whispers and shared histories, the image spread like wildfire. By the next morning, it felt like everyone had seen it. The photo of the town's reclusive widower performing a simple act of kindness touched a chord deep within the community. People started visiting the bench. They weren't there to stare at Henry, but to connect with something he had unknowingly awakened. They left flowers, lit small candles, and tucked handwritten notes into the crevices of the wood messages for loved ones. They, too, had lost. The bench became an impromptu memorial, a place of shared remembrance. Mayor Ruth Collins saw the photo as well. A kind, practical woman in her 40s. She was always looking for ways to breathe new life into her fading town. She found Henry down at the docks, his hands busy mending a fishing net, his mind seemingly miles away. She held up her phone to show him the picture. "Henry," she said gently, "you've become a symbol for this town." He looked up, his expression a mixture of confusion and annoyance. "A symbol? For what?" he asked gruffly. The mayor smiled. "For healing," she replied. "You've reminded us all that even after the worst storms, we can still find ways to help each other stay afloat." Henry just shook his head, unable to comprehend how his quiet life had suddenly become so public. A few days later, a letter arrived at the post office addressed simply to Henry Cole, boat repairman. It was from a man he'd never met, a rescue worker who had been out at sea during the storm of '09, the very storm that had taken his wife. Henry's hands trembled slightly as he opened the envelope. Inside was a faded photograph. It showed a rescue boat pulling survivors from the churning, debris-filled water. In the dark, chaotic background, something small gleamed in the water: his wife's necklace, the one he had given her for their anniversary. The letter explained everything. It read, "We never found her. I'm so sorry. But she saved 2 children before the boat went down. She got them onto a piece of floating debris. They survived. Because of her. You should know that." Henry stared at the photo, then at the words. For what felt like an eternity, the narrative he had carried for a decade, one of pure loss and tragedy, suddenly had a new chapter. One of heroism. That evening, when he went to the bench, something was different. For the first time, he didn't just sit and stare into the abyss of his grief. He stood, tall and straight, and watched the sunset, really watched it, as if seeing the colors for the first time. When Leela passed by on her evening walk, he called out to her. His voice was quiet, but clear. "You were right," he said, not looking at her, but at the horizon. "The light is peaceful. If you let it be." Leela simply nodded. A small, understanding smile on her face, a silent acknowledgement that a bridge had been crossed. Weeks turned into a month. Inspired by the new sense of community, the town decided to rebuild the old wooden bridge, making it stronger and safer. And right next to Henry's bench, they placed a new bronze plaque. It read, "In memory of those we've lost and in honor of those who remind us to keep living." At the dedication ceremony, the whole town gathered. Henry, no longer a solitary figure, stood amongst them. He sought out Leela in the crowd and handed her his old, worn sketchbook, the one filled with his ghosts. "For your next photo project," he said, a genuine smile gracing his features. She took it, her eyes wide with surprise. "Thank you, Henry. But what will you do now?" Henry looked out at the waves, a look of quiet resolve on his face. "Maybe fix a few boats," he said, his gaze drifting over the crowd. "And a few hearts." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a final golden light over the scene, the camera pulls back. We see the bench, glowing. We hear the waves, the seagulls, and now, the sound of laughter from the people gathered nearby. The once broken man, who sat alone in his grief, is now surrounded by life once more. A quiet pillar in a community that learned to heal together. Grief, it turns out, never truly leaves but kindness, in its many forms, gives it a place to rest. And sometimes, the quietest people become the strongest bridges, connecting a past filled with loss to a future filled with hope. Thank you so much for watching. If this story touched your heart, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more stories that inspire. We'll see you next time.